Welcome to the My Narrative podcast. I'm your host, Yafa Ares. The following is a conversation with Laura Ellis. Laura is the head of technology forecasting at the BBC. She's a journalist and technologist with special interest in machine learning, disinformation, and data. In her current role, she focuses on ensuring the BBC is best placed to take advantage of emerging technologies and also takes a particular interest in the technology ethics, personalised, and automated journalism.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Yes, very good. It's great to have you today on the My Narrative podcast. Sweet. So would you like to maybe start with an introduction and tell our listeners who is Laura?
That would be lovely. Thank you very much for having me. It's lovely to be here. So I'm a new technologist. I'm a baby technologist at the age of 54, which is a really weird place to be. So I've been a journalist for most of my career, 30 years, working for BBC journalism and doing that in the regions and the nations and then in London, and just really covering a whole range of stories, and then becoming very interested in things like machine learning technology and the ethics of that and how it was being used in journalism, and particularly things like automated journalism. So I decided at this very late stage in my career to switch and to move into technology full time. And I've been doing that now for 2 years and absolutely loving it, and extending and developing my learning every day. It's just such an incredible learning culture where we are. So that's how I've got to where I am, and why I'm involved in this sort of, big, beautiful world of looking at technology and technology forecasting.
That's amazing. I'm super excited to speak to you today. Obviously, I'm into tech, and as I don't know nothing really about media really and emerging tech. And before maybe we dive into all the amazing topics and things to cover, in your views in these transitions, what are your thoughts on, I guess, all the things that have happened in the last 10 years? You've been in the industry for quite a while, so you must have like a super nice overview of everything that happened in between.
I'm so lucky because, the thing about being a journalist is you get to see history at firsthand, and you see things unfold, and you're kind of quite a lot of the time in quite scary places and doing the interviews with people. And it's a wonderful thing to do if you're really nosy and you're really interested and really curious about things. And I guess I never expected technology to be quite as similar, really, because it really is. There are so many of the big stories in the world now that are emerging around technology, and things like, everything from disinformation, which has a very strong technological bent, to things like machine learning, to things like the very early stages of quantum computing and the wonderful things that we're hearing about in that field and how they're going to affect us long term. It really does give you a sort of a bit of a grandstand view of some of the things that are going to shape our society. I have a really weird interest in astronomy at the moment, and I don't know if you know this, but there's an eclipse very shortly. And I was trying to find out when the next total solar eclipse was for the UK. And it's actually in something ridiculous like 2090. And I've been obsessed with that date ever since, thinking about, how's the world going to look then? What's technology going to have given us by then? What's my son going to have inherited? He'll be 87 by that point. What will he do if he looks up and sees that eclipse? What sort of a world will we have left? Will we have mended the planet? Will we have created great, good things from technology, or will we have made things worse? And I guess, a lot of what you do in this job is think about the future. And that's just been a really interesting point where I've been able to think about a specific date in the future and start to kind of really wonder about what we might be doing now that will help us get to a better then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yes. And so in terms of the projects that you've led so far, emerging tech, it's so broad, encapsulate AI, and then we have the subset machine learning and analytics and all of that. Would you like maybe to share some sort of like practical projects that you've led that you're super proud of? Yeah, I would love to hear more about it. Tell me everything.
Yeah, of course. So one of the first things I did was to get involved in a natural language generation project, which was around looking at the journalism we do and working out how we might give it more reach and make it more personalized. And I think personalized content is something that's really going to shape the whole industry in the next few years. And this particular iteration was looking at how you take specific pieces of content and have them written by machine for different audiences. So you marry up a piece of content with a data set, and that data set has a way of linking up with the content, but in a way that the natural language changes. So, if you're saying it's less than or fewer than and greater than, the piece of content shapes to adopt that. So we wrote a set of content around, funnily enough, about National Health Service waiting times for accident and emergency. And we trialed this and it worked really well. And some people call this sort of thing robo-journalism. I think that's a really harsh name for it, because actually what we were doing was to try to marry up a really quality piece of content with lots of context and depth. It wasn't just a kind of like, not that there's anything wrong with this, a score line or a piece of business news. It was actually an in-depth story, and yet give it relevance if you were sitting in Leeds, or if you were sitting in Manchester, or if you were sitting in Hull. So whichever hospital area, trust area you lived in, there would be a cut of that story for you. And we couldn't, as journalists, write 1,000, well, it was actually about 150 versions of the story, but the machines can. And I think that to me just blew my mind, because I thought, this is just brilliant. I'd love to see versions of stories written for me with relevant local data or relevant data about topics I'm interested in. So that was the first kind of project that I got involved with. And it also made me think quite a lot about the ethics of this work, because to what extent do you tell the audience what you're doing? I mean, you have to. So we carefully constructed a footnote saying this story has been written by a journalist, but also with some automated content. And that made me think further about, as we get down the road of synthetic media, when we start to see things like synthetic, we could create synthetic newsreaders now. If we do that, and we're not intending to do that, but if we do that, and at whatever point we do start to create more synthetic humans on our screens, or through our speakers, how do we signal to the audience that these are not real humans with a soul, kind of thing? And to what extent, do we want to involve the audience? And I'm hoping the answer is a lot in the debate about how much of this they want to see. So all those issues started to get to really interest me. And those are two of the sort of big bits of thinking that I've been doing recently.
That's super cool. So I want to react on, you said a lot of interesting things. Wow. Okay, cool. So with all the things I shared, with all the things that you shared, I see obviously a lot of opportunities to, I guess, improve the end user experience, right? And provide personalized content that will make sense, that will bring joy, that will enhance anyone's experience when reading news online, content online. But as I can imagine, and maybe you can develop a bit more, there are risks that come to that. So that could be maybe content integrity, and then I'm thinking as well, amplifying the polarization or the echo chambers we live in. And what are the solutions to that? Like, what comes to mind when you said that? I thought of Tristan Harris, and I'm sure you know him, and he mentioned things like sometimes you can have some sort of prompts or to the user to see overviews or check out this other story that might balance it out their feelings about XYZ stories. So would love to hear how you approach with your team, how you balance the opportunities and risks of such a project.
You have just brilliantly described exactly that the kind of the thought processes that we're going through. So there is a kind of a direct trade-off between giving you as an audience member something that we know you like and something that might broaden your horizon. Okay, because if we know that you absolutely love content about spiders, that's a really weird example, but let's just say we do. We find everything we've got, we throw it at you, and we say, have more, have more. That's great. Maybe you're going to like that. Maybe you were just researching it for a school project, so maybe you're not. But we've made an assumption. But I think as we look at how we develop the recommender systems that we're looking at, one of the things that we have an obligation to do, and a kind of a real desire to do as a public service organization, is to foster diversity and to make sure that people are given a as broad a spread of content as we can manage. So that trade-off between giving you something that we know is relevant to you and giving you something that we know might not be relevant to you, but you might love it and you might go, gosh, I never knew that. I really want to explore that further. That's the great outcome. The poor outcome is that you say, why on earth are they giving me this? And you switch off and you turn away and you go somewhere else. So it's a really fine balance, but we do feel an obligation in the BBC to try to present a breadth of content, to try and introduce some diversity, and also to take account of some of the other benefits that there might be in providing a more personalized experience. So things like just shaping our content to your circumstances. Now, there's obviously a huge data and data privacy issue that we are dealing with here. But let's just say I wanted to tell the BBC that I'm going on an 8-hour car journey. I'm driving to Cornwall and I need a podcast or a set of podcasts. I need some content to listen to. What if I was able to say to the BBC, you know me, give me 8 hours of radio listening. Just give me everything that I might not have seen from Radio 4 and 5 Live and 4 Extra, and put it all together and stitch it so I don't have to touch my radio on that entire journey. I might want to, but I might not. So how do we get people, those sort of experiences? And then how do we do things? I mean, there's another aspect to this where, particularly during COVID, public discourse has been so enraged in some places. So if you go onto some of the platforms, you see people really punching out at each other about things like anti-vax and and still Brexit and things like that. How could we find really good examples of public discourse where really civil disputes are modeled, and could we point people in the direction of those stories and maybe try to uplift the experience of public discourse as a result? So I think there are hugely exciting places that we can take personalization, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that unfold.
Yes, that's interesting. And from, I guess, from the idea all the way to the implementations, you shared quite a few examples, like the trip to Cornwall and all of that. So do you have a sort of like turn on and off approach to the product or to the initiative? That would be interesting, meaning, all right, at this moment, I don't need any prompts, or I don't need any super narrowed stories. I like to just, jump into the world, and maybe that month I want just to hear about XYZ, or this is what's happening in my life.
So I feel like you've read my notes from today, because I've literally just been on a call talking about this. So people, I think, have a right to expect the BBC to provide them with a curated version of the world, okay? And I think curation is one of the most fascinating words that we could chew on at the moment, because if you have an abundance of content, if you have a lot of stuff, there is a job that we need to do either via machine or via human or via a combination of both to help you make your way through that. Now, providing a personalization service where we say, we know you like this, or we think you might like this, or we think you should see this, or lots of people like this, is one way to do it. But I think it's going to be very important to continue to do our kind of editorial curations, our view of the world. When I used to work in television, we had 26 minutes every evening, and we had to decide what was the most important story. It's an incredibly arrogant thing to do, isn't it? We think this is the most important story, and then this one, and then this one, and then this one. But actually, that's just become a very common model as to how we consume news. And in a sense, that's what we're doing online with the homepage or some other kind of curation, where we're saying, look, these are the stories we think you might be interested in. This is the mix. There's some light and shade in here. There's some serious stuff. There's some but I think that ability to take the stuff that's going on today and to boil it down into these are the things we think you might want to know about will be with us for a long, long time, if not forever. And there will be some people who, because they don't want to give us their data, or because they just want a shared view of what happened today with no personalization for whatever reason, they will need to access that. So I think it definitely does have to be a sliding scale from no personalization to potentially maybe quite a lot of personalization. We might want you to have more if you want it. If you want to give us more detail and more data and more preferences, we might want to shape that experience around you.
That's interesting. That's interesting what you're saying. And in me, I'm thinking not necessarily, you're the technologist here, but I'm thinking even as an end user, and me, I'm super obsessed into how I consume things and where, and actually on purpose I try to avoid the pigeonholes and like going too hard on my tribes, like in my interests, because I'm always scared to fall into that echo chamber. I always like to read from different sources. And I mean, I don't know, I'm not a product designer or owner, but it would be interesting to see if even paid media all the way to free media would provide on purpose and proactively prompt users to read another story to again try to expand their horizon and stretch their mind. That would be interesting to see if this happen really. But
I think so. I think it's interesting. And I also think, we have a question to answer about how much friction we want. So do I want machine learning to kind of spy on me, for want of a better word, and to interpret my behavior and say, oh, okay, she likes this, we'll give her this? Or do I want to have more of a dialogue with the system and say, actually, the three things I'm really interested in at the moment are this, and this, and I want you to find me stuff, which brings those things, onto my screen, onto my device. And I think we've kind of run down a rabbit hole in a way, and we've decided that this has to be frictionless because traditionally people have not spent a lot of time wanting to set preferences. But I'm wondering whether that's the right approach, and whether we do need to kind of almost offer people and display to them the opportunities that arise if they do engage more deeply with these choices. And maybe, I would love to tell a device, a publisher, that I have a commute. I don't at the moment, but if I ever did again, I have a commute for half an hour between 8:30 and 9. And I want you to fill that with stuff that I'm going to enjoy, that back to the Cornwall thing, but in a slightly different way. Or I want you to save me in a box somewhere on my device the 5 stories that you think I really need to know about today that I might not stumble across. I might not see them on a homepage. I might never find them, but that that I will like because of my behavior and maybe some of the things I've told you. I think there's a much richer consumption experience there for people if we do this right.
I agree with you. It has to be, I guess, intentional, right? So in the projects that you've led, are you in hands-on, or I guess that must be maybe on your radar, and you can comment on that around, I guess, all things around media provenance, disinformation, misinformation, and maybe you want to clarify, because I'm just like throwing a lot of buzzwords out there for our listeners, because that's big on the agenda in your industry. Obviously, we can't have a podcast without covering this.
No, it's massively important, and it's a brilliant topic. So I had literally started my new job in technology when we ran a big disinformation conference in conjunction with some partners. And the question we were asking ourselves is, as a media publisher, what is our role in this disinformation universe that's emerging? And it's hard to think. It's actually really hard to conceive of this now. But back in those days, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 2 and a bit years ago, genuinely, there was like, disinformation was seen as a bad thing. It was there somewhere, but it wasn't as all-embracing and all-encompassing as it is now. And we thought that one of the things that we could do to help would be to create some sort of media provenance system. So that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. We've been looking at something called Project Origin, which is around attaching signals or aligning signals to published content that allows the user and also potentially machines to look at this content and to say, I know where it's come from, and it has come from where it says it's come from, and it's not been manipulated on the way. And it's only a tool in the great scheme of things, but it's a tool which I think we're going to see potentially becoming really useful as we look at and see so much disinformation, miscontextualization, malinformation continuing to infest, our media environment, particularly on the social media platforms where all the sharing is done.
It's true. And I mean, I got first familiarized with all of that. I think it was via the work. Maybe you know her, Renee DiResta?
Yeah, she's brilliant.
Yeah, she's amazing. And you know her, and she worked a lot on that. And it all started, I remember, with just the story was around the vaccine and her son, and she just got a bit confused as to why. I mean, just why this like big mess online and where it's coming from, and she started to do that. Was quite profound research, I think. She's
amazing.
Have you followed her work, or do you know anyone else, like prominent investigators that you like in that?
Oh gosh, I've got so many of them. So Renee and I were on a panel together last year. In fact, this year there's something called CogX, which takes place every year in London, the AI Festival. I think it was last year's CogX when we were on a panel together, and she was absolutely incredible. also on that panel was somebody else that I really admire in this field, Claire Wardle from First Draft, who does incredible work in this whole kind of ecosystem that's built up. And Claire and I have worked together for years on and off. And she's just looking at one of the issues that we are really concerned about, which is how you describe misinformation to people. So how you flag it up, but explain it to them in a way that doesn't make them go, oh, you're just going to say that because you're the mainstream media, or or because you're Google, or because you're Facebook. So the way you label and the way you communicate with audiences on this is really important. And I just there's another person, there's so many people I could call out. So we're working with Sam Gregory, who works for Witness, one of the human rights organizations. He's got an incredible global view as to how we make sure we do all this stuff without disadvantaging people who are perhaps working in difficult regimes, or in countries where the media is working under different circumstances. And then back to the BBC, we have a brilliant disinformation reporter called Mariana Spring. I don't know if you've come across her, but the thing that I think is so remarkable about her work is that when she looks at people who are perhaps going out and spreading anti-vax, rumors and disinformation, the way she questions them is so thoughtful and considerate and so kind, that actually people respond really well, and they will tell you why they're doing this thing. They will tell you that it usually comes from a place of fear or a bad experience or something that's happened. And I just think the way she has gone into that and taken people who many of us in society are saying, oh, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? She will very, very carefully take them through telling their story. And it's so important that we try to understand why people do this, because there is a lot of sharing of misinformation, disinformation. Some of it is very deliberate, but it comes often from a place of fear. And you again and again, you see people turn around and turn away from that disinformation if they're heard, if they're listened to, and if they're given an opportunity to explain why it is that they've gone down that particular path. And Mariana has been quite remarkable in terms of the way she's tackled that.
Yeah, when you say that, I'm thinking obviously of algorithms, right? That it's the fear and emotions and all of that. It's the lifeblood of majority of algorithms right there. So that's unfortunately what works in major cases. I mean, I don't, you can comment, you're the technologist here, but I think, positive stories, they are not as viral as bonkers, crazy, horror things that are happening in the world.
No, we love that sort of thing. People love seeing the magnet stuck to your arm, where you've had of course it isn't really because of your jab, but there people are they're switched on by conspiracy. They're excited by conspiracies. They're excited by the notion that Bill Gates may have done this or done that, and it's kind of it's fun to a point, as long as you don't take it seriously. But when you take it seriously and say, I'm not vaccinating my elderly mother or my child or myself because of it, that's when it does become it does become dangerous. And I think we have to break our addiction to this. We love fun memes, we love cat pictures, we love lots of things on the internet that not necessarily don't take the world forward. They're just lovely, but this isn't lovely. This is something which we need to turn away from, because it's really harmful and it's damaging, and it's causing people who genuinely might have reasons to be on the fence on some of these things to go over to the other side, where all these kind of disinformation and misinformation and harmful things around, for example, anti-vax, exist. So I think it is a huge problem that we need to work together to solve. And it is a real multi-agency thing. Nobody can do this on their own. It's something we have to work together with the academics, with the tech companies, with the platforms, with publishers, and so on, and to try to sort of, to get a fix for it.
And do you think that, I mean, you seem quite optimistic and hopeful, which is great. Do you think that the size of the platforms today make it almost impossible to put back, to reverse engineer what we have done so far and what's happening at the moment?
I think their size is an advantage as well as a disadvantage. So they are very powerful, and enlisted to the side of good on this, they have a really big impact. So we've been doing a lot of work with a number of the platforms on a number of fronts. So for example, we're working with one of the platforms on something called the C2PA, the content provenance and authenticity work that we're doing. And when they engage in this, they can have a very big impact, and they want to, they're telling us all the time that they want to work on how they can help with this provenance work, how they can help to embody it in what they're doing, to make sure that, content that is harmful, this is another tool in their armory to help them to spot it and to deal with it in whatever way is appropriate, whether that's applying flags or or comments to it, or whether in some of the worst cases it might be removing it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Laura. And I appreciate, I'm asking sometimes questions that may be outside of the house, so please feel free to stop me and say, well, I don't know, I know I'm pushing your buttons here, asking open questions, because I already don't know a thing about the industry, and I'm just curious, really. And do you think that I guess tech platforms should be treated as publishers? I mean, this question is out there at the moment. Do you have any views on that? Or
well, I think tech platforms are different. I think we choose to engage with them, and the thing I always point to is the Donald Trump stuff around Donald Trump having been taken off Twitter, and there being a lobby that says, oh, that's terrible, that's free speech, free speech should be allowed. Twitter is a business, and Twitter will have its own rules. And if it wants to remove somebody because it believes it's breaching them or behaving in a way which is harmful to Twitter's business or to the other consumers who are on that platform, they have the right to do that. And I think a regulation of the big tech platforms and the giants is a really hot potato. And I don't have any particularly strong views on how and whether it should be done. But I do think that it's very important to distinguish between the right to free speech and the right to do whatever you like on a platform which happens to be, set up as a business and is entitled, I think, in most cases, to set its rules and not to have speech that it considers incendiary. So I think it's really interesting to see how Twitter have approached the Trump situation, and likewise how Facebook have approached it with the extended ban, which is going to go on for another couple of years. It's also really interesting to see how some governments, so for example, the Australian paid for news argument with Facebook, which raged for a while, has turned out and is turning out. And I think we'll see some pretty fundamental shifts in the way that big tech is regulated. They say they're open for that. And I think it's going to be probably one of the biggest things to watch in the next couple of years. And it will shape our experience of them, and it will shape their experience of some of the bigger players, who amplify hugely their messages by using those platforms. So I think it's fascinating. I'm just very glad to be alive in this era of fascinating technological change, because I love it. And I think it's just, I think if you use social media correctly, I use it a lot, it can be incredibly life enhancing. It can also be very damaging and very anxiety inducing and very poor for your mental health if you are unlucky, or if you find yourself using it in a way that is detrimental. So it's there, it's staying, it's going to be here with us. We need to find healthy, productive ways of engaging with it and making sure we don't tip ourselves over the edge into being destructive.
I agree. It's a learning process, almost a learning curve. It feels like we're learning as we grow and go. But yeah, so you've mentioned your work on C2PA and media provenance. So tell us the state right now and the future of media provenance. Really, that's such an interesting field. Honestly.
It's such a great field. So currently what we're doing is we're working in the BBC on how we might start to trial these signals in our own content, which is, you've got to start somewhere. C2PA, I think, has only been in existence for a couple of months, well, 3 or 4 months, but is already doing incredible work looking at how if you take an end-to-end view, so from acquisition of material right through to the consumption of it, those signals can be preserved. So one of the main roles of C2PA is to look at having an open standards approach to media provenance signals, so that if you're following and you're tracking a piece of media, suddenly it doesn't kind of like break down and go, well, actually we've lost the ability to track that because we're using different standards, different ways of doing it. So getting an end-to-end solution to this issue, it has been really well supported, and we are absolutely thrilled and honoured that so many people have kind of taken this up and say, said, we want to be involved, we want to help with this, we want to support it. So we published our first newsletter last week. I think it went out to 300 users. And we're just kind of going to take this momentum as we find it, and just try to continue to push this forward with the help of some of our very good partners.
Amazing. So sorry, I said C2PA, it's CTPA, and it stands for, can you tell me?
CTPA. Well, it stands, so it's C and then a 2,
yeah,
and then a PA. Yeah. So it's the Coalition for Content, Provenance and Authenticity. And the reason it's called the CTPA, which sounds like a little bit like a Star Wars kind of robot, and not the CCPA, is that the CCPA is a California Privacy Act. So we had to call it the CTPA.
And CCP is Chinese Communist Party, so you don't want to.
Absolutely, we don't want to be that. Don't want to be that either, because these things are confusing. You don't want to. If somebody's got a name already, you don't want to steal it. So we're the CTPA, and that work is going on as we speak, in terms of just gathering some views about how to best get these open standards working. So yeah, that works, something that we're really proud to be involved with.
That's awesome. And I mean, let's talk about journalism. And you've mentioned, I think earlier briefly, robot journalism, automated journalism. So what's the future? How would it be, like 80% AI produced articles or content, or or maybe other things to think of when it comes to personalized and automated journalism?
So I think there'll always be a human in the mix. I think news is so complicated and so wonderful that you need humans, and the machines are just not. We might never want them to be in charge, but they're not ready to be in charge. So you have to have a mix. You might put a machine in charge of doing your playlist choices, your Spotify stuff. We have BBC Sounds where we do music, and that works well. But with news, there are some subtleties and some nuances and some opportunities that you might want to curate. So even though we know of news organizations who do automate all their curation, that's not where we're headed at the moment. In terms of the robot journalism or the automated journalism, that's something that I think we will see grow. And so I think it will help to give us an abundance of content, which then feeds the personalization machine really well. However, I think there are also other ways that we can use AI in a really clever way within our newsroom. So if you use, for example, natural language to interrogate natural language skills, to interrogate databases, to use data journalism in a clever way, and use artificial intelligence, machine learning, to help you deliver depth of insight on databases, and thus deliver you stories that are going to come out of those data sets. That's a really interesting field that I think will grow. I think we'll also see different curations being made available for things like locality. So at the moment, if I want to have content that's relevant to where I live, I can go on a particular page on the BBC website and look at things that are relevant to my area. But we can be much more sophisticated with that, and we can be, I think we can be much clever about delivering a mix of content, which is not just the stuff that happened yesterday, but maybe some really brilliant stuff that happened a year ago that I haven't seen, the evergreen content, as we call it. How do I work that back into the mix? How do I make sure that I know about, the little snippets of information which exist in our media ecosystem that might be really useful for me, but will be useless to somebody living 5 miles down the road because it's just not interesting. So applying cleverer filters so that I, as somebody living in this village at this time, with these interests, with these habits, find a media experience which is helpful and enriching, helps me to live my life, informs me, entertains me, makes me happy. All those things are what we want to try and push really with personalization. And one thing I'll just mention about the reason we do this is we're a public service organization, we're publicly funded, we want to do things in the public interest and the public service. But also we've got some brilliant research that we've done recently, which looks at humans and technology and their relationship between them, and how, technology so often makes us sad and mad and essentially bad on occasion. And it shouldn't have to be that way. We should be seeing technology as an enabler. We should be able to switch off and walk away from it and know we can come back and find new stuff that's going to enrich us without doom scrolling all day or feeling that we have to constantly be always on when it comes to the news. So there have to be ways we can help people achieve that healthy balance in their life between themselves and their devices.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's interesting what you said. So it's basic. I mean, in terms of the data approach, is basically putting data audiences at the heart of the programs that you lead. And I couldn't agree more on, I guess, the relationships between tech and humans. I mean, we saw, for instance, via a famous clandestine Facebook experiment when they proved that emotions are contagious online. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it's powerful. Even though it's digital, it's still, you can still feel it. I mean, it's a story.
But it's, there are so many ways we could take this down unhealthy routes, and we just need to think about them. So, for example, you've got your rabbit holes and your filter bubbles, but you've also got things like, what if we gave people the right to personalize their content and use synthetic beings, so that they could have a newsreader of a certain ethnicity? Is that right? Should we do that? Is that okay? And so if we're facilitating people to hyper personalize their content, what are the downsides? What might come out of that would be unhealthy? Where are the limits that we draw, or is drawing those limits in itself just a really horribly paternalistic thing to do, which we shouldn't be doing? So you've got a bunch of ethics there. You've got a bunch of ethics around effective AI. You've got, should we be studying the way people touch the keys or their facial expressions, or should we be trying to guess what their mood or mode is? Because you might want to do that for lots of altruistic reasons. You might want to say, oh my goodness, you need some lovely soothing content because you look angry, and this is going to be a beautiful piece of music to or you seem angry in what you're writing. Do you want to think about what you've said? There are so many things we could do which would be helpful, and also so many things we could do in that space which feel incredibly intrusive and quite wrong. And every time I study effective AI, I think, oh, it's a nightmare. We can't possibly do it. And then I think, but on the other hand, when you look at some of the wonderful things that are being done with children's education, by studying the way that children adapt to the education that they're getting online, and targeting questions at them, and spotting when they're tired and needing a break, and giving them encouragement when they're flagging, it's an absolutely incredibly powerful tool for education. And you kind of think, I'd quite like my child to be, given the opportunity to be exposed to that. So there's always a double-edged sword. And I think, using this technology responsibly is going to be one of the key challenges that we have.
Yeah, I agree. As a whole, as a collective, for sure. Because individually you can have a great experience online, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a nightmare. I love the internet. Like, look, we're chatting right now and we connected on LinkedIn. It's just amazing, right? But but as a collective, I think I'm thinking of the collective force, and we saw that via like the Cambridge Analytica scandal or other things. It's when at scale, it can be dangerous, right? It's the collective. It's not necessarily the individualistic narrow view, but sometimes it's the global force. It's interesting.
It is, and particularly when you see how data is becoming such an enormous resource. There's no other word for it. And so one of the pieces of work we're doing is looking at how we can help people to keep in control of their data, to have better data stewardship, and to understand how the data is being used, and to harness it better, for their own benefit, rather than just having it kind of pouring out into the world and being used on their behalf, and often, potentially to their detriment. So it's a really important discussion that I don't think we're really having enough in society generally at the moment, data and how it's used. And we're very passionate about having that debate.
That's awesome. So let's talk more about the projects you've led. And I'm curious to hear, like, because obviously you said when you introduced yourself that you have such a great long experience in the industry, and it must be amazing to see it like almost like a slow motion avalanche or asteroids. I don't know, maybe something more, maybe better. I know you like astronomy, but like you saw the transition from what we called linear journalism versus digital, right? So maybe for listeners, you would like to comment on what's linear versus digital? I mean, I'm not sure everyone's familiar with that, and your views on that, and I guess the transition from the projects you've led in the past and now, and I want to hear everything about it. Tell me.
So the linear. So I started in radio. We were laughing about this the other day because somebody had shown me a video on YouTube of television back in 1975 and how it was shot on film, and and they were saying, oh, this is so old. Look at this. You shoot on film, and there's lots of men smoking cigarettes in the newsroom, and gosh, typewriters, no computers. And I was thinking, oh gosh, that's how it was when I started. I just missed the age of film, so I came in the year after they stopped using film, but we were using big chunky tapes, and everything had to be timed to the second. So it was very linear. You started your program at 6:32 and then you finished your program 26 minutes later, and it was on tape and it had to be perfectly timed, and you had to have standby material, and it was very stressful and brilliant. Absolutely loved it. So I did radio, I did TV, I did all sorts of kind of a combination of the two, and then I gave all that up and went into digital. And would you believe it? Nobody wanted to run the digital team when I took it on. It was literally like nobody wanted to run it. So I said, do you want me to do it on a trial for 3 months and I'll just have a go? So I then got into this world where suddenly there was no limit. You could create 900 pieces a day or 3, and it didn't matter because, it didn't matter in terms of filling a slot. There was this I'd spent 20 years filling slots in programs. You had to fill a day's worth of program on BBC One. You had to fill a half-hour news program. You had to fill a radio schedule. And suddenly there was this incredibly liberating thing where you didn't, it was about quality. It was about just doing the stories that you wanted to do. It was about setting the agenda. And I found that fascinating and a really interesting shift. And just moving the team that we had at the time into doing they were doing a lot of features material, making them do more news, was really fascinating, because again, you're kind of making judgments every day about what stories do you think are important, and quite often our judgment would be different to radio and television. So we would be covering different stories and we would be doing them in different ways, and just analyzing why that was and what we felt was different about our audience was really instructive. So I think that for me was how linear and digital kind of panned out. It was suddenly not having limitations, and it was having more opportunities, and also opportunities to tailor that content to think, right, well, actually, we're going to target this at younger audiences who are like this particular kind of content, and we're going to target it by doing this, and breaking free from that kind of one slot serves all, mentality, which I'd been working with for so many years. So that was the big change.
That must be unsettling at the beginning. That's crazy. Like the difference of almost business model or approach. It's quite profound, no? The difference.
It is. It absolutely is. But I don't think we'd really started to invest enough time in it at that point and enough money. So we could play. We had the opportunity. It was not massively. I mean, this sounds extraordinary, but it wasn't even particularly scrutinized at the time. So we played around with formats. We tried out sort of strange things. And one of the things that we did hit upon, which we thought was really important, was dialogue with audiences. So from the very early days, we were able to, so local radio, they can do phone-ins. Brilliant thing. You literally have people phoning in and they can ask you questions and you can have conversations. That's harder online. So we didn't have any message boards that we could use. So we started to do things like putting things on the bottom of the story saying, what do you want to hear about? What do you want to ask about this new city centre development or the government's new housing, legislation? And we would get people asking questions, and then we would do another article and we'd answer those questions, or we'd find another way to kind of weave in, those answers. And I think creating dialogue with an online audience is still one of the biggest challenges. And we talked a little bit earlier, didn't we, about Facebook, and not just Facebook, but Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and some of the comments you get on stories, and them being very punchy and very unhelpful and quite divisive. But how do you find those spaces online where you can have really lovely civil conversations and learn from each other and talk to each other? And those were some of the things that we wanted to sort of explore when we first started working as a team on that online proposition.
That's awesome, great. And so I saw online, and I know you're involved in super cool events. So we'll cover quickly CogX, because I've been there, I think, before the pandemic 2 years ago. That was really, really cool, super hectic, but I loved it. I crashed and stayed on the AI stage forever. That was pretty cool. But yeah, I missed it. I don't think this year I will be able to go. But so before chatting quickly about CogX, hey, I saw that the BBC organized a super cool, amazing event called Media, Tech and Society Conference Fair, and it's not happening again. Or tell us a bit about it. And I think you wrote a super cool piece, and I want you to share a bit on thinking about thinking machines. I think that was that one.
Yeah. So Media Tech and Society. So that's something which was invented by the team, one of the teams that I look after, called the Blue Room team. And the Blue Room team are amazing. They are sort of a team of real experts who kind of like they're technology experts, and they work up expertise on specific issues, and then they share that with the wider department. So they'll be running 14 sessions this week looking at sustainability in the world of smartphones, or they'll be looking at some new product that's come out of Tencent, and they just know all this incredible stuff. And we have huge ongoing conversations about how digital production is going to change things, and how we've got things like game engine production, which is going to completely revolutionize the way that content is created. They are just the most fascinating team. And this conference they've run, we have run it every year except the last year. And yeah, this year we're hoping to do something later in the year, but we have really been knocked out by COVID, as everybody else has. And that's not to say we couldn't have run something online, but we got our heads together and we felt that, I don't know if you felt this, but we had done so much online conferencing that we felt we had to have something really special if we were going to ask people to do another Zoom conference, because part of the fun of Media Tech and Society has been getting people in a room, getting people to network in the breaks, to have biscuits and stuff like that. I know it sounds like a simple pleasure, but we've really missed that. So I think we thought about it. We decided we had quite a lot of work on anyway, because we've had to transfer to an online model for all our Blue Room sessions. So we thought we'd give it a miss this year, or last year rather, and that we would think about doing something this autumn. So it's not gone, and we love it as a model, and we tend to have a focus each year on something slightly different. And there is a lot of crossover, absolutely, with CogX. So CogX have a fantastic ethics stage where there's a lot of content that we would sort of share those kind of those notions and those ideas and the kind of things that we want to talk about. So I'm really hoping, keep your fingers crossed, that we can bring something back for the autumn.
That would be cool. Can I join? Is it open today?
Yes, you got an invite.
Oh, amazing. No, but honestly, I read the article with passion, and I thought, wow, but it was so detailed. I mean, what can I expect from the BBC? But honestly, the agenda looked very cool, super engaging, a mix of discussions and play, and so I think I really like the agenda. But yeah, okay, all right, so I keep note
so
on
much
that.
fun. I tell you, and the most fun was so Richard, who's one of the fantastic team who runs it, he said to me, we're going to have an orchestra, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, brilliant, an orchestra. And so standing behind the stage and watching kind of, I don't know, I think it was a 23-piece orchestra sort of get loaded onto the stage, and I was going, oh God, he was for real, this is a real orchestra. And it was so ambitious, because they were playing some music that had been generated by an artificial intelligence thing, and they were showing how artificial intelligence could learn a style of composition or a style of a composer, and then reflect it back. And then we had a comedy group, and we had panels. So it was an absolute blast, and we love it, and we love the energy that you get around having people who care about this stuff in a room, sort of able to talk. So I'm really hoping we can actually get people into a proper room again and do that. We'd love to go back to the Radio Theatre where we were before, because that was a great venue. So yes, watch out for that invitation.
I will definitely. And I'm sure, do you know about Sonar? It's a famous Sonar D+ and Sonar, and it's all about technology, creativity, and music. It's different, but the concept is the same. It's sort of like interplay between technology, media, creativity, and all of that. So that would be good to have something in London. Cool. I'm excited for you and for the BBC and see what's coming next. So CogX, briefly, I loved earlier ask you, do you know about Renee DiResta? Yeah, of course, I had a panel with her. So tell me quickly, what was the panel about? It's super cool.
This year's panel, or the panel that we did before?
Maybe this year's. Yeah, let's just talk about this year. What's
So
coming?
the panel I did last time was about gosh, do you know what? I was on the ethics stage, and it was a sort of quite wide ranging, can't I say, panel about journalism. So this year, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about personalized recommenders and whether you can make recommenders in the public interest. So a little bit like what we touched on earlier on. What can we do with our recommenders to make them enriching of people's lives rather than, narrowing or yet another kind of bit of technology? So we've got a brilliant panel. We've got so there's going to be, I think it's a 40-minute session, and there's going to be 3 of us from an amazing Canadian startup and from the CDEI in the UK, and then me. And we're going to just have a really good conversation. We've just been planning what we're going to say and how we're going to argue with each other, because I think with a panel session there's always got to be a bit of argument, so we've just been identifying the things we're going to argue about. So yeah, hopefully it'll be good, and that's on Wednesday. It's Wednesday next week, so yeah.
Next week. Cool. Amazing. Well, thank you for your time today, because I know it's hectic and lots of things to prepare. It's such a big event. So yeah, cool. I'll make sure I'll keep track of any articles and outputs of discussion. So tell me, Laura, what's next for you? I mean, for the rest of the year and upcoming year in terms of goals and projects that you're currently working on. What's on the horizon for you?
So I am doing a master's at the moment, so that's taking up a bit of my time in technology strategy and solutions, which is with Aston University in Birmingham, and I'm loving it. So that's taking up a little bit of time. We're doing a lot of work on the personalisation and data that we've talked about. Project Origin and the C2PA work will keep me very busy. That's quite a lot of meetings a week. And I'm also working on a strand of activity around making sure that in the BBC we have the right attention given to emerging technology and things that are on the horizon. So this stuff that's not really hitting us yet, but is going to, and just getting all the big brains in the BBC who know about this stuff, and there are lots of brilliant people, just in a room every so often, just to say, right, let's just share some knowledge. So just working on that forecasting, emerging technology thing as well. So all that's going to keep me really busy, as well as I'm learning Mandarin. So by the time we get to the end of the year, I'm hoping to be ready to take my first exam in that. So yeah, that's it. That's me done until December.
I love it. You're amazing. Never stop learning. That's my motto. I lived 3 years in China. I learned a little bit. It's a very hard language. It's beautiful, but Korean is definitely easier. Chinese character, there are so many, but I'm sure you will excel. You have to study hard, and that's amazing. Is it, I mean, I'm just curious, is it just, out of curiosity, or is it for your work or for your maybe upcoming travels, or?
So it's mostly curiosity and just because I like languages, but it's also because I've spent a little bit of time in China, not nearly as much as you, and not nearly enough. But just understanding, what an enormous player they are in technology. I think it's kind of irresponsible not to have some understanding and knowledge. So I obsessively read about, developments in the Chinese tech market, but I'm also, I think when you learn a little bit of it, even though it's not massively relevant, you understand a bit more because you see terminology and you see things being used, and you kind of, you just feel a bit closer to it. So yeah, there's an underlying work reason, but I'm really doing it for pleasure because I really love it. So yeah.
Well, I'm sure you will go far, because if you like it just for fun, like that's the fuel. That's the good fuel. Interesting. Yeah, down the line. So tell me, in terms of it's such a complex ecosystems, and in your views, what are the conversations that you think we have a duty to start and maybe continue in that
around
space?
Technology generally?
Yeah, but whether it's emerging tech, or I mean, all the things that we covered, really, what's on your top radar? What are the things that you think as a society and collective that we have a duty that we have a duty to start or even continue?
So I think we have 3 things that we should be doing. So let's get our technology teams more diverse. Let's have more women and more people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. Let's have our teams feel more inclusive, because we make every effort to do that, but we still have not got enough of a mixture of people in our tech teams, and that's going to be so important, because particularly in technology, you have to make sure that views are represented from across the spectrum of the people that you're serving, and that's a really big obsession for us. I think secondly, let's make sure we don't mess up AI. Let's make sure that we don't end up putting biases into the work that we're doing, which are unhelpful to any groups that we're serving, because it's easy to do and we've seen it happen. And I think we need to take a really strong view as to how we make our AI beneficial and not detrimental to society. And I think thirdly, there are so many things coming that, we can take advantage of. I was saying to my son the other day, I would love to see technology really playing a brilliant role in helping us to undo the damage that we've done to the planet. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that? And I think there's every opportunity and every possibility that we might, but we need to really start to do that. So I was looking at the things that you tick off on the CogX I am interested in, and there was kind of like climate. I was thinking, well, it's not really a work. I'm ticking it anyway, because it's something that we all have to, and as we think about going back to the office, one of my big obsessions is making sure that's a sustainably driven process. So that's really important to me. And I think finally, just looking at some of the other stuff that's coming over the horizon and thinking what we're going to do with it, because things come more quickly than you think. So things like quantum computing is here. It's in its infancy, but there are lots of things that it will be able to do. And if we take a view that goes along the lines of what is it going to change about what we do now, that'll be wrong. What are the brilliant inspirational things that we need to think about? What will it do that we've got no ability to do now, no concept of doing now? We need to be really imaginative, and we need to think about what are the changes we want to affect, and how could this incredible new technology that we're seeing, which is so exciting, help us to do that? So not a small amount of stuff to do. It's quite it should keep us busy for a while.
Yeah, totally. That's amazing. And I'm super curious, because do you, outside of the BBC, do you read any paid journals? I'm super curious to hear, and if yes, so which ones? And if you'd like to share, you don't have to.
I read Wired. I read a lot of blogs. I read, I nick the astronomy magazine that my husband buys, and I read that. I read lots of magazines about cooking, because I'm very bad at it, so I'm hoping to get better. But other than that, no, I tend to just, most of my educational stuff is either done through my courses at the moment, or through sort of there's a really random set of stuff that I just access every day, because I see things and I get newsletters, and I just like, so we have a big sharing culture in the BBC where we spot an article and we share it, and then I keep them all in a little folder. So yeah, I would say about 20% of my time is spent reading stuff of some description that isn't part of my actual kind of work slate that I'm doing. But it's important, because you need to keep informed. So yeah, it's a big eclectic variety of things.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. You have to kind of, check a bit of everything. And any specific areas of interest that have influenced your work really in your life, do you think? Any
from the reading that I'm doing, or
yeah?
So I think I'm influenced by lots of things. Yesterday, I went to an art gallery, and I was looking at some beautiful paintings, and I wish I could remember the name of the artist, but they were sort of snapshots of a particular road in Rome called the Via Appia, and they were taken as though almost like they've been taken in a moment in time, and then halfway through the building would change to something else. And I think I'm very fascinated at the moment about time and the nature of time, and we were talking about the eclipse and things like that, and I'm just really fascinated about how time from where we're standing now often feels like, oh, we've got a certain amount of this, I've got 10 years before I retire, and then I've got this and I've got this. But in the scheme of things, we're such tiny little dots, and I love the idea of making sure that the little bit that we weave in our lifetimes fits into that big tapestry and does it effectively. So I guess that's what I'm thinking about at the moment. I'm reading a lot of books like I don't know if you've read the 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this world by Ellis. Have you read? Absolutely brilliant. So again, there's the concept of a human life and the impact that it has on the wider universe. So super deep stuff. It's a nice antidote to kind of trying to sort of work out bits and bytes and how they all fit together. But yeah, that's where I tend to spend most of my stuff. And there are so many great, we talked about this in the online conferences, online events, the Hay Festival, the Charleston Festival. There's a brilliant Jeanette Winterson thing coming up in August at the I think it's the Charleston Festival. So I could fill my entire life with sitting in rooms listening to people who've got these incredible brains or this incredible insight. So we're really lucky. We should just make the most of it and do as much work as we can.
Couldn't agree more. So many yeah, it's like a sort of democratizations of knowledge and content, and you can tap into these amazing resources, the internet, and find amazing people and projects and things. So I always ask this question to my guest: Laura, what are the skills and the character traits that help you so far in your life?
Okay, so I think determination. You just got to be positive and optimistic. And I've got a load of people who I know are going to be grumpy with me at the moment because I haven't got back to them with emails and things. So I think you have to try to be sort of charming, work really hard. Often in times you don't really feel like working because you need to get stuff done for other people who need the stuff that you require. And I think if you're not enjoying your work, then you should probably be doing something else. So I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I try to get as much enjoyment out of it as I can. And I also try and give as much back as I can. So I think, making sure that you take care of your colleagues and that you look after them, that you remember their birthdays, and that you buy them gin when you have the opportunity to do it. That's really that's probably my theory in life. It's lots of gin, lots of enjoyment, and lots of hard work.
Lovely. Well, Laura, it's been really fun. It's been already almost an hour or even more. I didn't keep track of the time, but I think it's about an hour. So I'm conscious you're super busy too. So thank you so much. It was so
Lovely
much
to
fun.
talk to you. Thank you so much for asking me. And obviously, we're going to stay in touch. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the My Narrative podcast. If you enjoy the content, we welcome your support by contributing on Patreon. Find out more at mynarrative.co.uk. Bye.